Hey everyone, it's Will, GamerDad, with another video for you. So hopefully you got a chance to update your game. It is in the App Store or Play Store depending on where you are. And so once you do that, you'll have access to all the new banners, as well as Chapter 1 of the new Future Mythos. If you haven't played it through, I have done a live stream on it, and the most important thing is really enjoy the story. A lot of big spoilers, a lot of big information bombs. Very, very enjoyable. Now that being said, in tonight's episode of Should You Summon, we'll cover all the newest banners, including what most people are looking most forward to, which is the Stardream Encounter, aka SDE. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So, for those who are relatively new to the game, a Stardream Encounter is not that common, maybe a few times a year at most. It does require 1,000 paid stones. However, what's different about the Stardream Encounter versus other types of Fateful Encounters is that you do a normal 10 pull, which allows, any unit up to date, including Daisy. So it doesn't give you any sort of uprated odds, like a 10% Faithful or anything like that. All 0.02s. Obviously, all the 5 stars from the beginning of the game until now are in here. Some are higher rated than others, so on and so forth. And of course, unfortunately, the normal 3 stars, 3.5s, and 4. So note that the first 10 pull you do with the Stardream Encounter itself doesn't guarantee you anything. You do not guarantee a 5-star in that. But no matter what the results of the Stardream Encounter, you get a Stardream piece, which is valid for 30 days from the time you pull it. And you can choose every unit available in the game up to tonight, including our newest unit, Isuka. I won't have to scroll down, but you can understand what I mean by that. Keep in mind that it only starts counting down from 30 days from the time you activate it, and keep in mind that this is available for approximately 1 month UTC, which is basically Japan time. And so, I wouldn't wait until the very end to buy it. Maybe buy it on the 15th or 16th, depending on your local time. Now, first of all, if you are spending any money, this is the most valuable type of banner in the game. You get to select any unit you are missing in terms of on your roster that you need to kind of fill out the void. You can get the most powerful unit, you can get a waifu, a husbando, whatever you really want. And so most people use the Stardream to kind of fill a roster spot for a unit that you were not able to be successful on summoning in the past. Of course, like I said, this is a new and unique banner in that it also includes the newest unit, Isuka. So I know a lot of you will be asking me, and so I'll try to just be brief with my suggestions for the Stardream. I do have a very old video on my channel about who to choose with the Stardream, and although the units obviously are old, the principles by which you think about them and kind of evaluate how to pull hasn't changed. So I'll just leave a link below in the comments, in the description. You can check it out if it is pertinent to you. So without further ado, in terms of units that I would recommend suggesting to pull, keep in mind that these are only my own opinion. You obviously have your own decision making in terms of what is best for your roster, since I don't know which exact roster you have. And let's be honest, I'm not presumptive enough to say I know enough about the game to absolutely modify or optimize your team. That being said, first things first, without any question, Melissa is probably close to number 1 on the list, if not Pichika. So those I would consider to be 1 and 2, and no particular order. So if you have Melissa, then go for Pichika. If you have Pichika, go for Melissa. And keep in mind, this is only assuming that you don't have any of these units. And of course, in the case of some of the units with extra styles and stuff like that, I would assume that in this discussion, you do not have any form of the unit. So anyways, Pichika, Melissa. If you're wondering why I'm choosing those two, Melissa is a broken unit, still very, very viable, allows 1 and 2 turn super kills, can kill all endgame bosses given the right roster you have. lots of support moves. I mean, the list goes on and on. You've probably seen a lot of YouTube videos using Melissa, as well as Pichika, which is a more recent super broken unit. I mean, double damage, break status, can actually convert into defensive modes, so on and so forth. I do have 5-star reviews of both of those if you want to see them in action, but those by far are probably the most valuable to pull. Now, this next tier would be very debatable in terms of what you want to pull. And so I'll just go in the list of, I'm going to go by weapon zones and just briefly talk about things I would suggest either adding or looking for. Now, first of all, we're trying to pull for units that are still meta, that is very useful for taking on endgame content right now, and potentially for at least 6 or more months in the future. I mean, we still have the gift of foresight. We can still see a few months ahead into Japan, but I don't really like suggesting pulling on units that, let's just say, fade in effectiveness over time. And in general, this is just a general thing, but generally, pure DPS units do fade in effectiveness over time. There's always new and more powerful units. What we're really looking for is offensive support units as well as support units in general. Those can consist of zone setters, units that can be used in multiple teams, things that increase things like crit damage, crit chance, obviously things like physical resist down, and so on and so forth. I don't include healers in those because they're not used for offense, they're just used for defense, and the meta really nowadays is trying to kill the enemy as quickly as possible, either with 1 or 2 turn Melissa strats. You can also use other really powerful weapon zone teams. So again, we will go down the list here. Oh, one last thing. AS Hardy is pretty decent. However, I would not consider him equal to Melissa in order to suggest him as a tier 1 type of pull. If you really want to add him, he still does add flash strike stance, but his support capabilities are not nearly as potent as Melissa in my opinion. Okay, so for blunt teams, we have in our picks AS Miyunfa and AS Tsubame. And I'll just quickly go over that. AS Tsubame, again, 0 MP farming. She is easy to get her farming attack up depending on the number of fist or blunt users on your team. You can easily walk through most of the main story, especially if you're relatively new to the game, limited on Grasta, limited in roster, and so on and so forth. Not only that, she is extremely useful even into endgame. She has a dual debuff 35-35. She can do tremendous damage while in AF. She can boost earth damage with Mole Technique. She is pretty fast, very, very valuable, useful against endgame super bosses as well. Now, on the other hand, we have AS Tsubame. AS Tsubame is a blunt zone setter. That in itself is already pretty decent. On top of that though, she can boost earth damage by 60% in blunt zone, weapon damage by 60% in blunt zone. She has guaranteed crit rate for the whole team, does a ton of damage when you stack up her stacks. And she has end of turn effects like end of turn heal, end of turn barrier. Yeah, really, really powerful. I would give the edge to AS Miyunfa only because even though 0 farming is very useful in early and mid game, by the time you get to end game, most of us end game players can farm with other types of attacks, either with AoEs with sufficient Grasta, or even some units like Joker, which is a free unit, can VC in and do some damage. And so I find farming type units not necessarily as useful, even though they're still very, very convenient, and I do use AS Tsubame while walking around. But between those two, probably have to give the slight edge to AS Miyunfa, although like I said, AS Tsubame is not bad at all. There are maybe other units you want to consider for your team as well, but those two really stand out in general. Next, for Pierce, you can always add something like ES Sukiya. Now keep in mind that ES Sukiya does have 2 other forms, normal style as well as AS, and so if you have any of those, do not pull. That being said, ES Sukiya is still the very powerful wind Pierce zone setter, does a ton of damage, can do power down, crit damage up, wind resist down, and she has EX moves which can give you hold ground when you power up the EX bar. So very, very powerful. Downside to her, there is a free Pierce zone setter such as AS Sheila, and don't forget that foreign for the most part can be grinded out with 5 treaty Cs, which most of us will have pulled along our ways in getting other gacha units. So keep that in mind that she may not be absolutely necessary. She is just one of many considerations when doing a star dream. Next, we can go with Magic Zone. For Magic Zone, first of all, I will say that this is very controversial, so forgive me if you feel wrong. I think that AS Myris, if you don't have her, is still very, very essential in Magic Zone team. She does increase speed and int for your whole team. She can do a ton of damage. Obviously, she does 3 hits, so you can add combo rate Grasta on her. She can heal on demand. Her DPS is still pretty decent, and when she VC it in, she can actually do damage to wipe out enemies as well. Now, she is a dated unit, and so keep in mind that she doesn't necessarily hit all the points that some people might want when summoning for a unit. But I've used her on many Magic Zone fight, and she is indispensable for kind of powering up your team, keeping things all good. Not to mention, Earth Magic teams are a thing, and you have a lot of synergy between AS Myris, AS Clark, as well as AS Chio. In terms of Magic Zone setters, AS Chio is essentially free. What I mean by that is you'll get a Chio at some point. You'll probably grind out 5 treatises over 3 to 6 months, especially including 5 chants. So I don't think she should be one you would select. AS Rosetta, with the advent of having AS Chio, you can probably survive without AS Rosetta, although as you've seen on some of my teams, I use both. So I wouldn't use a Star Dream or AS Rosetta. If you really need a magic user, you could probably do AS Myris. Again, just a controversial pick, so to speak. Now, in terms of Slash, one thing I'll say about Slash in general, there are lots of free Slash units that are extremely powerful. I don't think you would necessarily consider this an absolute hole to fill because, other team comps might require more help. That being said, AS Kiko is one of our newest Slash units. She is extremely powerful. 0 MP farming, does a ton of damage. If you watch some YouTube videos, there are a lot of videos that can use her to conquer massive bosses that normally can't be taken down even by full teams. I think a few YouTube members have put out videos of, like, for example, Kiko against the twins, only with like 1 or 2 units, stuff like that. It's crazy stuff. Really, really useful. And being that she's relatively new, she's going to last into the future for some time anyways. You can also go back a little bit and choose AS Thilily. Thilily AS is still extremely powerful. One of the top DPS for Slash in the game, has Fire and Shade. And let's be honest, we still haven't even seen things like Shade Zone or anything like that. So who knows how useful she'll be in the future. But if you want strong Slash DPS, those two could probably be added to your team. Obviously, you can also add ES Isuka. Now, one thing about ES Isuka in general, if you have Isuka in any form, as a free-to-play or even light spender, I don't recommend pulling using a Star Dream for her. I would recommend just pulling using stones. Even if you're poor in stones, keep in mind that with any form of Isuka, you can farm out the 5 codexes for ES Isuka. And so I mentioned her in that if you don't have any form of Isuka, you can definitely use a Star Dream for her. But I think that's a little bit of overweighting on Isuka. Sorry, Church of Isuka, but I really do think that that's a little bit overweighted and there are better units to choose. Back to magic units, ES Nagi is another one that's one of those interesting ones. I'll just summarize that she is extremely powerful. However, being the fact that she works best under full AF bars, and you kind of need a team comp to kind of put around her to make her a lot better. She by herself can carry a whole team, but I'm not sure if she's absolutely necessary for all endgame team comps. And so even though she's extremely powerful and you can choose her as a Star Dream, wouldn't be my first choice overall. And finally, honorable mentions to some offensive supports like Nakoko, for example. Remember that Nakoko is essentially one unit valued as 4 units. What I mean by that is she functions in all elemental zones. That is fire, water, earth, and wind. She is not useful in weapon zones because she doesn't get a lot of those benefits through those zones. But she can still do a lot. She's increased crit guaranteed rate, increased crit damage by 50%, shielding, increase your type damage while decreasing the type resistance, and on-demand heal too, up to 3,000 HP when in elemental zone. Alright, there's also other offensive supports such as that you can go for. But certainly Nakoko, as I mentioned, some of the zone setters can be gotten. However, one thing I'll be saying about elemental zone units, there are going to be a ton of them coming. A lot of the new altar units and stuff like that will be available over the next few months, and you probably can pull on some of those to get a zone, elemental zone unit if needed. I really do find that weapon zones are probably a little bit more versatile. You can mix and match different elements depending on your need and conquer bosses as you'd like. So, sorry that took a lot longer than I would like. Hopefully that gives you some insight as to what to pick with the Star Dream. I know that it's going to be controversial, and if you're not sure, definitely get some extra advice. There will be, I'm sure, some comments and advice on the subreddit on Eden if you need to check that out. So I'm just going to move on from there. All right. Next, we have the Isuka ES Fateful. 2 times, pretty standard stuff, 10% stuff on the 10th pull. Normal odds for all the other ones. Faithfuls do have Daisy, which is the newest unit in there. And of course, we do have the regular one as well. For us who are spending free stones, standard ES banner, 0.4 for the 4.5 normal style, 0.8 for the 5-star normal, 0.8 for the ES. Does not have the newest unit, so Pizzuka's info is here. I don't believe ES Nagi or Daisy should be in here. So let me just double check that. No, Cthulhu is actually in here, surprisingly, right there. But Daisy's not in here. Okay, so back to ES Isuka. So again, just as a summary, slash zone setter, heals upon coming in. She is an ES unit, so when she powers up her ES move, she'll give 100% damage reduction barrier to all party members for 1 time, and full regen on HP. She's also a Lunatic Shade user. That means she'll convert her physical and magical defense into physical and magical attack, which will enhance her elemental attacks. That is in general. Lunatic Shade units are extremely powerful. She also doubles as a fire unit, similar to Thillalili in some sense, where you can do a ton of damage, except that ES Isuka can tank a lot of hits. She can give herself shields. She can debuff the enemy 30-30. She has a type shield 50%, just like Aurora Force or even Radius's Elemental Barrier. She has some regen and some other things like that. Don't really have to spend too much time on her. She is extremely powerful and can do tons of DPS while allowing your slash zone team to survive. And of course, fire can be certainly easily synergized with people like Aldo, Surge, and so on and so forth. So the main thing I will say about ES Isuka is that many of us, as free-to-play or light spenders, already have one form of Isuka or another. If you do, I highly recommend you to save your stones and not pull on this one. Grind out the treatises, codexes in this case, because there are a lot of powerful units coming up. Now, in terms of brand new units, there's only one that's called Flame Lapis, and I believe she is going to be a magic water unit. That's months away still, and technically all the different future Mythos units, which are either altars or ASs, they're probably older units that you may have some form of. So check out the AE Wiki. It'll tell you some upcoming content in terms of the units you're expecting, and you would prioritize saving for banners where you don't have any form of that unit. That being the case, Isuka is a highly popular unit. She is, some people are going to just summon regardless. She is waifu status for a lot. So I too totally understand that. But from a free-to-play standpoint, if you don't have any form, very, very good banner. 2% chance of getting any Isuka and then you can upgrade. If you have Isuka in any form, I would advise a pass, or at the most 1,000 or 2,000 stones, just to kind of, try your luck at it. All right. And finally, 2 more simple banners. Isuka normal, Dewey normal. I'll just bring up Dewey's. Pretty obvious. Guaranteed 100% chance of getting a Dewey on the 10th pull. Not to mention you can get every other unit on pulls 1 to 9, and same with Isuka. These are only useful if you don't have any form of them, and keep in mind that Isuka is not only having the ES, she'll also have a altar, which is introduced in chapter 1 of the future mythos, and so you will have the access to all of those units through side grades and grinding if you pull on the regular Isuka banner. In the case of Dewey, he does have an Ultra form as well, which is extremely powerful. He doesn't have an AS yet, but who knows if WFS will ever release one in the future. And so if you are missing any form of those two, you would rather use your paid stones on these ones and save your other paid stones for the Star Dreams. That way you don't have to waste a pick of a Star Dream, which is much more valuable than the plain Isuka and Dewey banners, in order to get someone you need. So hopefully that is explaining some of my thoughts about these banners. Again, feel free to leave some comments below what you ended up picking, what you ended up going with, if you ended up summoning for ES Isuka. And keep in mind, like I said one more time, you can delay your Star Dream encounter use until near the end, and then have another 30 days after that to decide, because who knows if you hit something on an off banner. Now, as for myself, generally I would avoid pulling on ES Isuka, just because I do have both forms. Well, we'll see if I feel like gambling or not, but realistically speaking, if I had some discipline, I would advise against it, and I should listen to my own advice. Anyways, lots to cover there. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.